So make sure that you have the ability to go back and look at chapter 4. But basically what you want to think about when you think about the stages of group is like building a house. You know, if you have a piece of property out here and you're going to go build a house, what's the first thing that you do when you build a house?
Well, you make a plan.
You make a blueprint, right? And that's that foreman, okay? Because you got to do the screening, you got to figure out who's coming to your group, you got to get all that ready together. And then after you've got your blueprint, you've got your plan, that's your proposal that you're going to write. What's the next step? Then the foundation, okay. And that's where we are right now. We're in that transition phase from where it's just empty land. It's going to become something now, okay? And this is the trickiest part. It's not hard to get a group like formed and get people to attend. But during this phase right here, this is the most where you're going to learn what you do well. You're going to learn where you need to improve at. Because the transitioning phase is where you do not want people to get stuck and never get to that working phase, right? So this chapter talks a whole lot about like things to look for in that transition phase, things to monitor for, how to get groups moving through that phase, and getting to past issues. It's kind of like, you know, we talked about like when you first meet somebody, like the first date, you're on your best behavior. You know, you might go eat a salad and drink water, you know, but take me out 6 months later, I'm getting a steak, right? So it's kind of like in that transition phase, some of that newness wears off and true selves start to show, and sometimes there's conflicts within that, right? Because we're all different people. So it starts on page 106.
Now, are you going to upload these videos also?
I had not planned on it unless somebody needed it.
Well, see, I like the videos because I wouldn't have to stop right now to ask you to repeat something. Like, I can take notes when I'm rewatching the videos.
I don't care to do it. I just can't promise you that it's going to get done because it takes so long to upload them.
Yeah, I would just like to.
I mean, if you brought a flash drive, I could just download them on your flash drive before you left tomorrow. I mean, or a blank DVD and burn it on there. If that would be easier. I mean, I don't care a bit, but just know that it took like 8 hours for one chapter to upload.
Well, I can bring you.
So I mean, I don't care to upload them, but it might not be on there till, you know, almost a week by the time all 5 chapters get up there. You know, does that make sense? Just because, I mean. So it starts off talking about the transition period there on the bottom of page 106. So this is the stage between the foreman, when you're getting started, like that orientation, we're all new, to the working stage. So like I said, it's a very, very important stage. And if you look right there, it's really strange because the average is so varied there. It says that groups that last 12 to 15 sessions, so that's like groups if they met once a month would be almost a year long, or 6 months worth of group. They can spend anywhere from 5 to 20%. 5 to 20% of that time stuck in this stage. And it says the transition begins with storming. Storming and norming go together in this transition phase because you kind of got to go through that. Everybody's showing their true colors before, and you got to get through that and get to an acceptance level before things can get really real and get to the working stage. It says the transition begins with the storming stage, in which members start to compete with each other to find their place in the group. Things that you'll see during this phase is anxiety, resistance, defensiveness, conflict, confrontation, and transference. Those are the things as the group leader that you've got to watch for. And it talks about during this phase you've got 2 kinds of tension. You've got primary and secondary tension. What is primary tension?
I guess primary would be like main stuff that you can see, maybe? Like.
This is often just about being in a strange situation.
Okay.
Uncomfortableness.
That would be probably like when it's new. You're not
Right.
really used to, you don't know what's going to happen.
You're monitoring yourself.
We don't disclose very much.
Okay. So what's the difference between the primary tension and the secondary tension?
Well, it says intergroup conflict, so I'm guessing you have start to have conflict between other members of the group that causes tension on everybody else.
Right. So it's not about the group as a whole. It's that maybe between one or two people. Maybe if one person's in there monopolizing, people get frustrated with that group member, or maybe somebody said something, or maybe there's transference, but there can be all these intra-group conflicts that causes that secondary tension. You know, you ever been in class and somebody that has to always say something, somebody always monopolizes? Like, it's funny, like, because I can see, like, everybody in my classes, and you can tell without ever teaching a class before, because if somebody gets to the point like that, that the class gets that secondary tension, as soon as that person opens their mouth, everybody else in the class, you'll see them go. And you know who that person is in that class because they're tired of it. You only got to teach them one time. I've had to do this 2 years. You know, it's that you get frustrated, but no, does anybody say anything?
Maybe eventually.
maybe there might be
You
somebody.
make snappy comments, maybe, but you don't ever really.
Me?
No. Like,
Oh. I was like, okay, I probably do.
No. Like if you have that person in your class, like you
As a
like,
classmate.
Yeah, but I don't know. You probably wouldn't.
Like discussions might get more heated in a classroom setting,
Well,
stuff like
okay.
that.
Right, like if somebody was very rigid in their thinking, you can see where that would make that secondary conflict because you're like, I can't believe you don't have a gray area in this at all.
In
Or
undergrad, we had a guy in our undergrad, and towards the end of it, we just had it. So there was like a lot of like moments towards the end where every one of us had like.
But he actually turned out to be like the best person in the world.
Yeah. He was like really super nice. He was just like one of those people that got on your nerves, and after a year and a half, you're like, oh my god, I can't take this.
Yeah.
right. But that's where that group leader is such a strength because if you let that go and ignore that tension, it doesn't get any better.
It gets worse.
Right. And people might just quit coming, or people might just shut down and they're not going to talk anymore. You know, they're done. So it's that group leaders to notice those differences, to notice those changes, to pull that out and just say, you know, and since you said Charlene, I'm just going to use you. You know, every time Charlene opens her mouth, Lil, I noticed you rolling your eyes. You know, let's talk about what's going on here.
Would you actually like?
I would. Everybody has their own different philosophy, but you would address it. How you address it and how directly is more about your personality. You can do gentle confrontation, you know.
Like in the group in front of everyone.
Yes, because it is a group. It is wrong for you to ever have a group and treat these people individually or vice versa. Like if you was doing marriage counseling, you don't go then and see just the husband or the wife by themselves.
I just wondered because a lot of times there's a lot of conflict in a lot of the groups that I do at my practicum spot because I do like DUI and drug court and stuff like that. And there's, you know, like, I'll just say an example. There are drugs, you know, that you can take that won't show up on a drug screen. So
Yeah,
we've
like the
had
synthetics
people,
and stuff.
Well, we've had people come in on like over-the-counter stuff that doesn't show up, like super high in group, and that's really offensive to the people that are working hard in their recovery. But in that situation, my boss always kind of pulls people out to talk to them about it. Or like we had a situation where
Is that a mandatory group?
Yeah. Maybe that's
Totally
why.
different,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
They are not voluntary participants.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, right. So there's your whole difference, right? Because you also have a right if they fail drug screens to kick them out of group.
Well, if they get terminated, they go to rehab. So she, you know,
Yeah. So
she kind of tries to line them out, and if that doesn't
Yeah.
work, they're gone.
yeah, you're right. There's a difference there when it's when it's a mandatory group, right? Because there's a lot more consequences to somebody getting in trouble in a mandatory group versus somebody just saying I'm not coming back to a voluntary group. But let's take that though. What would happen if you were in AA? Because AA is voluntary. People voluntarily go to AA, and you obviously were intoxicated when you come to AA. Do you think the members at AA would confront you?
Yeah.
Right.
I think
That's their group,
sponsors
right?
and stuff like
See,
that,
they wouldn't wait for somebody, right?
No.
They wouldn't wait. And so that gives you a good balance between mandatory and that voluntary. Those members would probably walk that person right out, or if they had a sponsor, they'd take them out or whatever.
We have a lot of people that are mandatory to NAs too, and then sometimes if that happens, they'll come to mandatory group and tell on each other.
That sounds about right. Okay. The reason that is so important when you're in this storming phase and things are kind of chaotic, it's kind of like that. The tension somewhat is good because people are becoming real selves, right? So you don't want to like handle it in a way that you're squashing it to where you're ignoring it. You don't want to like push it and ignore it and act like it's not there. You know, if everybody was perfect and doing fine, they probably wouldn't be attending a group, right?
Very authentic.
Right. And so the things that you're wanting to happen during this tension, it talks about right there in the last paragraph, is you want to provide that direction and control that tension to make that catharsis moment happen. You know, you want to push them to that moment to where that light bulb goes off and they're like, I do that. I have been doing this to myself. Those things that you're actually pushing for. And sometimes people got to get a little uncomfortable. I mean, kind of think about a moment where things might have got heated or you got really frustrated and you've had something on your mind and you've not said it, but at that moment you're so uncomfortable and it's so much of a burden that even if it didn't come out the way that you would have liked to have planned for it to come out of your mouth, it came out finally. And you had that moment where you got it out. You ever told somebody something you wanted them to know, even if it was about them, but it had to take that heated moment that you had to get uncomfortable to be able to get frustrated enough to kind of get it out of your body? You know, that's why that tension, a level of tension is good. Because what you don't want to happen is like what we talked about before, that that kind of group where everybody thinks everybody's so great they don't want to offend everybody else, so we're going to target other people and never work on ourselves. So it's okay to have the tension, just the group leader needs to work on it, they need to control it, and they need to have that structure to where they can make it be beneficial. And that's when it goes into what type of conflicts we have. They talk about conflict resolution and conflict management. Now, if you look at the two terms, conflict is conflict. But the terms basically mean conflict resolution and conflict management. You're putting one in a positive perspective and one in a negative perspective. And that's really where you've got to think about who you are and what kind of group leader you are. Are you going to look as conflict as, man, I don't know what to do. I've got too much conflict. This group is out of control. Are you going to look at that as a positive opportunity for growth? Or are you going to try to squash it and get everybody to be nicer to each other? So are you going to go in that conflict resolution or the conflict management? And you got to figure that out. And so that's kind of what you're thinking about when you are practicing that last Saturday that we're in class. That gives you the opportunity to kind of see what you need to practice the most and making those groups run smooth, getting that equal airtime, just leading that group and being structured and keeping everybody on task.
So when it comes to that, when you kind of base how you're going to handle things on what you're better at, if you're better at resolving conflict or if you're better at just kind of managing it because it's more therapeutic for the target group or whatever you have, you know what I'm saying? Like, because in our groups, which our groups are really different, I know that. They're more just kind of a process type deal. But they can start to get heated, and instead of saying you got to stop it, you know, we need to calm down, we let it go, because if it happens in the room when we're not in there, it's going to go to blows, and they're going to get kicked out. So we let it go. We just kind of
Manage it.
exactly.
Right.
And I like that.
If you did the conflict resolution, what could happen?
then they would, if I did the conflict resolution, I'm looking at the group that I'm working with, and if I would have to force conflict resolution. I would.
So,
And then
to
I would
answer
get
your
that-
question, I'm going to ask you another question.
Okay.
What is better for the people that you're serving? Conflict resolution or conflict management? Then that's how you answer that question.
It's not what I'm better.
We're going to do a lot of things we're not comfortable with. That doesn't come naturally. So you always have to think, even though that I'm not good at this or this makes me comfortable, what's best? What's in the best benefit for the person I'm serving? You want to know this? Middle paragraph on the bottom section. The one that says the concern. The one that starts with the concern. You want to know that in the storming phase, that the biggest concern is power. Okay? A lot of that conflict is coming from people trying to obtain power in the group. Your biggest concern with your group members in the storming phase is power. And you've got two forms of power. You've got informational and authoritative power. Now, informational power might be, I'm going to exert power because I have knowledge about this. Carter was talking about a group with for substance abuse. Well, somebody in that group that has a whole lot of those statistics and stuff like that might try to insert some informational power because they're much more knowledgeable than everybody else in the group. Right? Somebody else in the group might want to put in some authoritative power because, well, it could be because they were the group leader, but as far as member goes, maybe because they work in the court system, or maybe because they work with probation and parole, or just have a political seat, or whatever. Those are the things you got to watch for too, that struggle for power. Are they doing it in an authoritative way because I am who I am and this is my level, so I can assert some authoritative power? Or I'm more knowledgeable than everybody else, so people are going to listen to me because I know I know more than everybody else. Those are forms of power that you'll see within a struggle of a group as well. On page 110, we move on to resistance. It's just common. You should expect it. You should just figure out there's different forms of resistance. How am I going to deal with it? That's that, because you can't not have it. People are going to resist. They resist their treatment goals. They resist improving. They resist on doing things. So you just need to know that that's a norm. It's going to happen. It's going to be there. So anything that keeps that group from going to that working phase, holding it back, any form that is happening is considered resistance. And it talks about some examples in the text there in that first paragraph are, I don't want to talk about it. Just not answer the questions that the group is going around. You're the leader. You show me how to change. So I'm resisting because I'm going to put it off on you. It's your problem, not mine. Or they divert it to somebody else. It talks about, I think Jim doesn't like me, I'm leaving. Right? They're going to just blame. That way I can walk away with a good excuse. Right? That's those forms of resistance. You guys are a bunch of losers. I don't have to have anything in common with you. That's people just basically denying that they have the problem. Right? They wouldn't have been there in the first place if there wasn't some commonalities. And the worst thing that you can do is be defensive. Okay, you have to always remember that this is not personal. This is not about you. It's not about who you are as a person. It's not about what kind of mother, father, brother, husband, whatever you are. This is your job. You're doing this to provide a service for people that need something. So you can't always expect a big pat on the back and them to be thank you and pleasant for the services and the time that you're giving them. It's not about you. Do not get defensive. If you don't control it right, it talks about people will get angry and unproductive. It gives you 3 other examples. No, there's more than that. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 different ones. So I can talk and walk. You guys can help me out. The first one's intellectualization. Can you get off my thing? I need my water. What does that mean?
Behavior characterized by an emphasis on abstraction with minimal amount of effort or emotion.
What does that mean in layman terms? How would you restate that? What does that mean? What is somebody doing when they're doing that?
The person's going to answer and talk and sound smart and say all the right things but with no emotion.
With nothing, right? No content information, really. They're just going to answer a question very factually, right? Right. That's good. Next one is questioning. What is that?
They question somebody else without having to answer it themselves.
Yeah.
They put it on somebody else.
Right. So is that one talking about like we're all going around in a group, we're all answering the same question, then it comes my turn and I'm like, it's my turn to answer the question. I'm going to say, you know, I wanted to talk about what Katina brought up. I thought that was really interesting. I'm going to go back to her. I'm not answering the question for me anymore.
Stealing Katina's answer and just adding on to it.
Right, right. Okay, what's the next one?
Advice giving.
Okay, what is that? Pretty much what it is, right? So let's see if there's a good example here. That last section there, it says, an example says, I think what you need to do is exercise more. Until you feel better about your body, you will never feel good about yourself. So instead of them working on themselves, they're just telling somebody else how to deal with what's going on. Those are things that, honestly, if you think about it, you have to be really careful, because if you don't watch that person every time you have group, that could be, a lot of these things could actually be perceived as being supportive and engaging. So you really got to watch that they do that all the time, not just once. But it's just becoming a habit of how they're avoiding, how they're resisting their own group process.
It says that the advice may have merit, but the members don't know one another well at this time. Does that mean that the advice giving part, once you move further into a different stage of the group, where you're not in the forming stage, that it's not something that's working with?
What do you mean?
Right here, it says this advice may have merit, but because the members do not know one another well at this time, it will probably be seen as criticism. Separate Jan and
I think that if it was in a working stage, I think what it's saying is it wouldn't have came out that way. Like, it wouldn't have been that kind of just telling you how to fix your problem. It would have been more of an empathetic statement, because then that person was really listening, because they're the resistant. And people do give advice, and I think it's saying that the merit part is because it's kind of like you're not working on what we're working on, you're just telling other people how to fix their problem. And if that was later on in the working stage, then that person would know that anybody, right? Anybody in this room can tell you their problem right now, and it's really easy for most of us to give you an easy solution. Doesn't mean that the solution's easy for the person having to actually fix the problem. When you get to that working stage, you know that. You know that you can't just, then it'd be more of an empathetic statement, like, maybe it might help if you wanted to go walking, maybe, could get somebody to go walk with you. It would be different sounding. It would be differently implied if it was in the advice given. Band-aiding.
Misuse of support. Like trying to calm somebody down and they really need to let something out.
This is really hard for people that have, and you yourself might experience this, This is really hard for people that have a hard time seeing somebody else express emotions. I don't know where y'all are at in your classes, but you may or may not have heard this before. If somebody is crying and very upset, you are not supposed to go and touch them and tell them it'll be okay, you don't have to cry anymore. You're not even supposed to hand them a tissue box. Why? Why is that bad?
Maybe it gives off the impression that they shouldn't be crying. Here, stop crying. Here's this.
Well, I mean, think about it. If you're sitting there, think about some time when you've cried. You know, what's the difference between somebody just coming and sitting beside of you and you might have laid over on them versus somebody handing you tissue and say, it's going to be okay, you don't have to
You don't
cry.
want to hear that.
It's like you're giving them a false sense of hope.
But they're also telling them that's enough. They're telling them, dry it up now.
Right.
And when you do that to somebody, whether it's in an individual session or in group, then you're not permitting them to release, and you will block their catharsis. And the whole point of all this is to have that catharsis. That's why we're here in the first place, to have that light bulb moment. And if you don't let somebody get that process out, then you're blocking it. And it's really hard for some people, and I understand that, so it's something you might have to practice. But it's really hard for some people to have that moment to where you just have to let it.
See, the hard part for me is like if someone is like in your office and they're like bawling. I mean, should you like, without them seeing, like slides? The tissue thing is the thing for me, because I'm like, you know what I mean?
No, I do, and what I have learned just over the years, because like I used to, I would at least like take my foot and slide it over, or try to, take it from this side of the desk. I got them sitting all around. They know they're there. Use them if you want to. I don't care.
We have them
You
on
use
all
your
the
shirt, your
tables.
sleeve, your.
So that way they can just grab
So
it
you just
out.
don't have to worry about interrupting them at all. That's just something I learned, to not do that.
And people do that to themselves too. Like, here's an example. I did a DUI assessment a while back, and this man, it's like the only trouble he's ever been in his whole life. He has like a teenage son, and he just came into the office and broke down because he was like, I set a bad example for my son, he's ashamed of me, and he was like, I'm so sorry that I'm crying, sweetie, I'm a grown man crying in front of you, and he kept trying to make himself stop, but he couldn't. And I was like, it's okay to cry, but he was,
And another thing that you can always tell people when they do that is say, you don't need to apologize to me.
yeah.
That way they quit. Because if you don't say something like that, they'll keep saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And that isn't them trying to find that way to stop themselves, yeah.
I kept trying to be like, it's okay, you're here, you're coming to the class, that's setting a good example for your son,
Right.
But he was just, he kept apologizing and he was embarrassed that he was crying in front of me, and it made him cry more. And I didn't know what to do. I felt awful. I was just like,
And those are those moments that you can really practice that empathetic statement of letting them know that you see that. You could say, that true Rogerian, to where you say, I can't imagine how you must feel, and when, how it must feel for your son to know this is going on, and you could
to
really
him,
just
it
give
was
this.
just such a huge deal.
Right. And you could
most
say,
people that come in are like, I got DUI, whatever,
Yeah.
But to him, it was like
yeah.
horrible.
Like, what about, like, how much emotion are you as a therapist allowed to show? Because, like, what if you've worked with this client for a long time and they finally tell you something awful that, like, it happened to them, and, like, they break down, like, so you built this relationship and you care about them. Like, I would assume that you should never cry in front of your client.
I know that I've heard that as well, but I won't sit and say that it's not happened.
I mean,
I'm
yeah,
human too.
it's, in a perfect world, you wouldn't cry, but you're, I guess, technically not supposed
But
to.
I think that what I do, whether I tear up or if I just cry, I just don't stop. I don't let that be. If I'm crying, if it's caused me to cry, then whatever I was supposed to be doing, I just don't stop doing. If I'm talking to them, I don't apologize for crying. I don't say anything about it. I just don't address it, period. I mean, if I'm crying, you're visually gonna know that I'm crying. To me, I don't see a point in like having a big discussion. You know, I think that. I mean, I think some people can control it better than others, but like you said, some people that you know so well. But I've had people tell me stories that literally broke my heart. And I mean, and kind. I mean, so I mean, kind of to me, like I mean, I understand what you're saying, like you shouldn't cry, but I'm not. I mean, I'm not. I mean, I think that's probably like one of those things that it just depends on who you are, because the other part of me says that I'm kind of cold anyway. So it's like the fact that I still have that human connection. I don't want to lose that. I don't want to hear something horrible and not have any reaction to it. I don't want to ever become that person that nothing affects either.
Well, it's happened a couple times with a couple of my kids, and I feel like it's more odd me trying not to cry.
Right. So if you just let it go and don't even address it, then to me it's not an issue if it happens. You just kind of keep going with it.
Across as like, oh, well, like it's so bad, that, like even they're crying. You know what I mean? Like,
okay. Think about this: if you were telling that story to somebody and they cried, how would you feel about the fact that they cried?
Yeah.
I would think they were real. I would think my issue was real.
Is there anything negative that you can think of that you would think?
They feel sorry for you.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't want nobody to feel sorry for me.
Or like if you're the type of person that kind of likes to live in what happened to them, or like what happened to you, you'd be like, well, yeah, see, it's absolutely horrible because even they're crying, it didn't even happen to them. So it might, make you want to stay there. I don't know.
So I mean, I guess like I said, I think it depends on how you look at it, and I think it always just depends on who the client is too. But I do know, that it's not something that's like widely accepted or anything like that. You're not supposed to be in there boohooing with every client, but I mean, I just don't know that anybody can do this for 20, 30 years and not have some of those moments and still be human.
I mean, especially like women, like we're a little, women especially are a little bit soft sometimes, I think. So.
I think it just depends on more where it hits a person.
Yeah.
No matter what gender they are. I think just some things will hit you harder. And I think that the connection you have with the client impacts that as much too.
Yeah.
Especially if, like you realize maybe what that client has had to overcome, So it could be like proudness almost of, gosh, they're such a survivor. They're so strong. I mean, tears aren't always horribly sad, I cry at those Polaroid commercials, Those, so.
It's sad when we have people leave, like we're happy because they graduated.
Yeah.
Right,
When you have
that
somebody-
bittersweetness.
Yeah, it's sad. 'Cause they work their butts off to.
Dependency. What's dependency?
Behaviors of courage and bystanders and band-aiders.
Someone that's looking for the advice or looking for someone to sort of sugarcoat.
Like they're helpless.
Yeah.
Okay. Right? I don't know how. And then somebody tells them, but I can't. That's the complainer rejector, right? You give them answers, but it's still not going to go anywhere.
What do you do if you're having like sessions with or like groups or whatever, and like over time they're still yet in this role, like and you've tried whatever, and they're still yet saying, well, I can't, like.
Have you tried this, like, cause I've got one that's almost like that, and I just have to look at her and be like, you're lying. You can't. I've seen it. And I think with her, the validation of me just being like, I know you're lying. You can't fool me. Do it.
So you're doing that kind of like Socratic kind of thing where you're kind of
I got middle schoolers.
yeah.
It's That's the only thing that works.
What's up with the girls out of the academy? It's like a lot of them come from homes that like they have not been taught responsibility. They haven't been taught how to act. So everything is always someone else's fault. Like it's someone else's fault that they're there. And I feel like they've been there since January, and like I have talked to them about everything. And there's some of them that are still yet like, well, I can't change because this is just how I am. And I'm like,
So they
no.
play the music.
You can change. You're like, like this happened to me and this is why, and it's like they're not.
I think it just depends on how you are, what you're comfortable with on some levels. But I think the confrontational on some level is good, because then the whole group is aware that needs to be done for that person as well, and then that might help them back off on aiding it and they might kind of do the same thing, like you're capable of it, and support the group leader if they address it that way. But even something like not taking responsibility and stuff, and so so when you got drunk and ran and robbed that store, somebody had a gun to your head, right? Like who was that was forcing you? Who was that had the gun to your head that said, "I'm gonna blow your brains out if you did that"? Right? But it depends on how, you can go from harsh to gentle, and all that always depends on, the more comfortable you are with somebody, the more they know you can be rougher than you can, like in that first session, you can be a little more harder. So if I said to you, the form of resistance that involves a group member presenting as helpless and incapable while refusing to listen to feedback, you would know which form of resistance that is, right? And we've talked about the monopolizer quite a bit before. We talked about that even when we were just trying to make our own group rules. So I think everybody pretty much knows that. But one of the things, like if you look through this, when you look through this, a lot of times it'll give you stuff like this right here in the second paragraph of monopolizers. It says they can be helped by confronting them, teaching new skills. So a lot of times they'll come back and give you some ideas too to help work on that. And then the last one there is the attack on the group leader. We already talked about it the first weekend, is you want to keep your group small so that they stay cohesive and you don't have that subgrouping issue, because that's one of the biggest ways that the group leader will get attacked, is if you start having subgroups that kind of meet outside and kind of come back in to attack their group leader. Task processing. Basically what this is saying is kind of when everybody started, in that forming stage, they knew why they were there, they knew what the goals was, objective, they knew what we were supposed to do. But now that newness is wore off, and people are becoming who they really are, and so there's a pause in us meeting those goals and those objectives. So now people are more concerned about, does that leader of ours know what in the heck they're doing? Do they even know what they're doing? Are we safe? They start looking at all these other task type things, and they want to make sure all those things are managed, because that's that process they have to go through before they take that step. And what is that step that we're talking about? If we've already met each other, we're off through the newness, and we're in that storming phase where you really know who is what, you really know about your members, you really know those characteristics that's come out about everybody. So you're questioning the leadership, you're questioning the safety, you're questioning the confidentiality, all those things that you're being questioned. And hopefully, if it all goes well, all those answers are, all those questions are answered good. What are they waiting for those answers for? What step are they waiting to take?
The working step.
Right. Right. Because can I step into the trust circle? Can I let it go? Is this group going to be safe and protect me? And is it going to be a safe area for me to start talking about that personal stuff that's really underneath those layers? The other thing it says that during this phase that you've got to work for is if the group's not moving, then a lot of times what they might do, is point their finger and say, we're not moving because you're the one holding us back. You're the one doing this. So they're looking for that scapegoat. They're looking for somebody to blame in that group for not moving forward. And it talks about when you do get stuck, or if you're not really sure like how well everything's going, it gives you some ideas of like better ways to make observations and kind of see it. And the first one it talks about is process observer. And you want to know, you really, really want to know what the term process observer is. But basically, a process observer is one of those people that come in, they're a third party, they're not part of your group, they're just going to kind of sit back and watch. It's kind of like somebody coming in with a new teacher and just watching the new student teacher, right? And instead of just watching the leader, they're watching the group dynamics. Because just like anything else, sometimes it's easier when you're not in the middle of it to kind of see what's going on when you're looking in on other people, and all you're having to do is to observe. It's a lot easier sometimes than when you're actually trying to lead the group and manage it as well, to know all the dynamics that maybe you're missing. And then that person would kind of meet with them and kind of tell them, this is what I saw, give them the feedback of what they observed. Says the second way to work through this stage is called leveling. And leveling is where the group leader basically just really says, we're kind of stuck and this is what we're going to do. And Charlene, you've not been participating. I really want to see you pull out of that shell today. I want to see Caitlin. I want to see you answer questions every time you come around. You start making that equal airtime apparent. I want to see everybody. Right, making it level. I want to see everybody participating. I want to see everybody answering questions. I want to see everybody engaged today. And you call them out by name. Like you've got to get the group moving. Quit holding back. Quit resisting. Some other stuff that it talks about is like you can even have people like all your group members could keep logs or journals. And they could write stuff down of what they think about maybe if something's holding back, how they think it's going, and they could turn it into you privately, and you could kind of read through that and might get feedback from the group. We already talked about conflict management. On page 115, it talks about types of conflict management. You've got competing, accommodating, collaborating, avoiding, and compromising. These are 5 different styles of conflict management. What is competing?
When you're trying to, like, your problems versus this problem, my problems. You're trying to compete with who's got the...
I'm worser than you.
Yeah.
It's the truth.
It's a power struggle.
I've got a client right now, and he always tells me, well, you don't have anybody that comes in with the problems I've got. Accommodating. What is accommodating?
Just pleasing others without regard to your own problem.
If you're accommodating, now you can see why the competing would be a conflict, right? Because then you just get that tit for tat. I'm going to tell my story, I'm going to tell my story, I'm going to tell my story, and let's see who can get the worst to the nth degree. How is accommodating a conflict?
You're not making them face up to their problem.
What's next?
Collaborate.
Which is?
Come together to find a solution, make it happen. Working together.
Okay. So would you consider this a pretty positive conflict?
Yeah.
Okay. What's next?
Avoiding.
Which is?
self-explanatory.
And we know why that's just like that resistance, right? We know why that's an issue. And compromising.
It's like you don't really find the right solution. You just give in to one that might just be the easiest or the fastest to.
We meet maybe in the middle or something.
Right. So it's not so much giving in. You might be giving up a little, but somebody else is having to give up a little bit too to meet you in the middle to compromise, right? So you are maybe giving up something, but somebody else is having to meet you all the way. You don't have to give up everything
But
to
couldn't
make that
it be
compromise.
that one person doesn't budge, so you have to compromise? Is that what you were trying to say? Like someone else?
Okay, that's a
I
good
guess
point.
that would be accommodating.
All these words you get to use in your paper. I know. Very good. So then we go from storming to norming. And norms is exactly what it is, what it says it is. It's kind of like the do's and the don'ts. What's normal, right? What's normal classroom behavior? What's things that you should do? What's things that you know not to do, right? So groups are the same way. What's the norm and behavior? And you want to know that norms are expectations. You want to know on page 116 that norms are expectations about group members' behaviors that should or should not take place. And the main thing that takes place, and you know it in that group when it happens. Because up to this moment, the group members will refer to themselves as I and me. And there's going to be a moment that they're going to say, well, we are one now. We're in the Norman phase. It's the we-ness. The we-ness phase. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that we part. You're looking for when they refer. Think about you. How many of you refer to your cohort as we and not my class or when I go to school? How many of y'all say we?
We do.
Huh? Okay, so you feel me now? Did you the first day? No. So you're at least in that Norman stage, right? Okay. When you're in this phase, you're almost to the working phase. You're just like a step away. The things that you want to focus on the most, which starts on 118. People can say things. It's your job to make sure that whatever is said, whatever the conversation is, even if it's something about the past, it's okay to talk about something that happened a while back, but you have to keep it in the here and now. It's all right that this happened to you. How is it affecting you now? Right? Keep it into the here and now. Hope. When you watch those, chapter 4, you'll hear that term called installation of hope. One of the things that makes groups work, just like when you think about AA, somebody that just is trying to get sober or maybe even struggling on if they can be sober, and they go to an AA meeting and they sit there and watch somebody that talked about that they were an alcoholic for 25 years and this is, maybe they're getting their coin, for so many years, another year. That installation of hope is, if they did it, maybe I can do it too. And hope is a big thing, right? The fact that it can happen and that you know somebody it happened to, it's a big thing. You're also looking for cooperation and collaboration and cohesiveness. We've kind of already talked about those kind of terms, but that's that. All these things all follow under that we-ness, right? That's what you're looking for. You know that they're together. page 20, it goes through some more terms. It's the prescriptive and the proscriptive norms. Basically, the prescriptive norms are the norms that you're supposed to do, and the proscriptive norms are the norms you're not supposed to do. That's what you're supposed to avoid, like what you don't do. The other thing that you'll really notice in this phase 2 is the level of commitment that the members have to each other. If you didn't show up today, you think somebody in this class might contact you? If you didn't show up all weekend? Right? Because they're expecting you, right? There's that commitment there. And we talked about that last time too. I don't see any of these terms that we really need to go over that you shouldn't already know. Supporting, empathizing, facilitating, self-disclosure. When it talks about self-disclosure, though, that's as a group member, you're kind of watching what people are doing, monitoring what people are doing, and assessing it, because that tells you what stage your group is in because of what they're doing. Self-disclosure, it says, is one of those things that you're monitoring, because the more people are capable of self-disclosing, you know that they're getting closer to that working phase, right? Because they're getting a little more trust. They can talk about what's going on. And that ends the norming chapter.